Hi, I'm Amy Jo, and I've been doing a video series on the Book of John. Today is the last video in that series, and we're going to wrap up the discussion. We've been talking about the 7 I am statements of Jesus in the Book of John, and those are: I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the gate for the sheep, I am the good shepherd, I am the resurrection and the life, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I am the true vine. And we've also been looking at the 7 miracles that Jesus does leading up to his own resurrection. And those are changing water into wine, healing the sick boy who was dying, healing the man who was crippled, feeding the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, walking on water, opening the eyes of the man born blind, and raising Lazarus from the dead. Now, all of these miracles are leading up to something. They're leading up to Jesus' own resurrection that takes place in a garden. And the I am statements are also leading up to something. These I am statements are leading up to one final I am statement, which Jesus makes in a garden. So we're going to start there today. In John chapter 18, it goes like this: On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with him. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't often fall to the ground when I'm talking to people. Normally that is something we would expect if someone has given us like news of some kind of awful tragedy or some kind of great news. So it's very odd that the people have fallen down here, because they shouldn't be surprised. They were looking for Jesus, and they came to the garden and they found him, so they shouldn't be surprised. So the fact that they fell down to the ground here is a hint that there's something significant happening. Now, there are other places in the Bible where people fall down when they encounter God, and it's when they know that they've encountered God. Sometimes they'll fall down intentionally to kind of bow down and worship God, and other times they fall down unintentionally, maybe out of surprise or shock. But that's one hint. Another hint that something different is happening here is something you wouldn't notice unless you're reading in the original Greek. And I know you guys have been eager to learn some Greek. It is a Bible study after all. So we have a couple Greek words here for you. This first word is ego, and that means I. And this word is eimi, which means I am. Now, you've taken a foreign language, you might know that in several other languages you don't need a pronoun a lot of the time, because the ending on the verb will indicate whether it is a first person or second person or third person, or whether it's plural. Now, when Jesus says in the garden, "I am he," what he says is ego eimi. So he's emphasizing this. Ego is only used for emphasis because it's actually unnecessary. Now, scholars have linked this to the other I am statements that Jesus makes. Oop, that's not the one. They've linked this to these other I am statements that Jesus makes, and other places also in the book of John, where Jesus uses the phrase ego eimi. And this phrase is also used in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. When Moses is kind of out tending some flocks, God appears to him in a burning bush, and God is going to send him to Egypt to free his people. And as part of that conversation, God reveals his name to Moses. And in the Greek translation, God's name is ego eimi. In the English translations, it could be translated, "I am who I am," or "I am the one who is," or "I am the great I am." So ego eimi, when Jesus comes out of the garden and says, "I am Jesus of Nazareth," ego eimi, what he's saying is, I am all of these things, and I am God. Now, Jesus' resurrection, all these other miracles, are kind of a progression. They progress from something that maybe isn't as impressive to healing and multiplying the bread and walking on the water, and eventually Lazarus' resurrection. And that leads up to Jesus' own resurrection. Now, Jesus' resurrection is different than Lazarus' resurrection. And here's why. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. These other people, these gray people, represent other people in the Bible who were raised from the dead. And these people, including Lazarus, were all raised back to their old life. So it's more like their life was kind of put on pause because they were dead, but then God came along and hit the play button, and they got to resume their life. And they would live out the rest of their life and then die again, kind of a natural death that we would think of. Jesus, on the other hand, was raised to a new body, a new immortal body, and it's a little bit different than his previous body, but it's still him. It's still his body, but he has been raised and it has been changed somehow. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul tells us a little bit more about this resurrection. Because this resurrection of Jesus, he is the first to be raised from the dead, and in the end, we will all be raised from the dead, and we won't be raised to our physical bodies exactly as they are, but it will be like our physical body. Like our physical body will be raised and transformed. So anyway, Paul says in Corinthians 15, we will not all sleep, and he's talking about death as we would think of it. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. So a lot of times we think that when we die, we go to heaven, and we're kind of like spirits, maybe hanging out with God. But actually in the Bible we learn that we will be raised in a physical body at the end. And Paul continues on later in that chapter. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the firstfruits of those who have fallen asleep. And Paul calls him the firstfruits not because he's the first person to ever be raised from the dead, but because he is the first person to be raised to this new body, this new life that is coming for everyone. So Jesus is the firstfruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. So Paul makes this connection for us between Adam and Christ. Adam was the first man, the first created person, and Christ is the first man who has been raised from the dead, raised to the new creation, to the restoration of creation. And John also makes this connection for us because he mentions the gardens. He mentions that Jesus was arrested right outside of a garden, and that also Jesus was raised from the dead in a garden. His tomb was in a garden. And there's we can do kind of compare and contrast here. Adam and Eve are cast out of the garden because of their own sin, and Jesus willingly leaves the garden where he's been praying to be arrested and to take on the sins of the whole world, which were not his own sins. Adam and Eve eat from a tree and bring death into the world. Jesus dies on a tree and brings life into the world. Now, before Adam and Eve sinned, they would walk with God in the garden. They had an intimate and personal relationship with God. And now that Jesus has conquered sin and death, we can again have a personal relationship with God. That relationship that they had in the garden, we can now have again because Jesus has made the way for us to re-enter that garden and to re-enter life as God intended for it to be. Now, the good news of the resurrection is that there is nothing so broken that God cannot fix it. whatever illness, pain, emptiness, hunger, darkness, or sadness that we've experienced, anything in this life that hurts us, any chaos, any need that we have, Jesus can meet it, Jesus can heal it, Jesus can fix it. Jesus came to earth and did for us what we could not do for ourselves. Sin will bring death and destruction into our lives, but it cannot destroy anything completely. Jesus coming and dying on the cross paid the price for our sins, and when he raised from the dead, he made the way for us to live a new life as well. And now we can re-enter the garden and be with God and be the creation that we were meant to be without sin and death in our lives. It was really hard to pick a song to go with today's passages because there actually have been lots of really good songs written lately about the resurrection, and I'll probably actually share some more of those with you later. Another good song to listen to kind of when we're thinking about the gardens today would be In the Garden. If you've been around the church for a while, you may have heard the song In the Garden. It was a favorite back in the day, and when I used to work in the nursing home, it was one of their favorites, right up there with Amazing Grace, In the Garden. So that's a really good song to check out. It's about Adam and Eve walking with God in the garden and how we can also walk with God in the garden. But the song that we will have today is called Graves into Gardens, and it's kind of a newer song, and I think you'll really like it. And I also have another video to share with you, and it's a video of an artist restoring a painting of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and it's a painting that had been damaged and destroyed and broken, and it looks like it's beyond repair. But this artist does just a wonderful, just unbelievable job repairing this painting, and I think it's a really good image for us to remember that no matter what has happened in our lives, we may feel like that painting, we may feel dirty and broken and ugly and beyond repair, but there is absolutely nothing that can happen to us, nothing that we can do that Jesus cannot conquer. Jesus can fix anything. Not even death can hold him back. And we can all be healed and brought back into the garden with God. Thank you so much for joining me with this study. I really enjoyed sharing with you. And I hope you enjoyed this song, and have a great week, and go walk with God in the garden.